Hey folks, MasakoX here, and it's time for the holiday miracle this year. Over the last few years, we've had stories running throughout the entire month of December focused around one particular subject. That being, for example, the likes of Videl being the strongest human, and Chi-Chi being the strongest human. But this time around, we're going the other way, bringing a character who wasn't human to begin with into the world and realm of humanity. Now, you might have been able to guess who that is from the title, but we got this idea from the round table and it really inspired us. We've been really keen to get this started, haven't I? And I think you'll like this too, because there have been some rumblings in the community about what might have been had Shenron not only been a Dragon Team member, but also human. Let's get the story going, shall we? Coiled within his fiery hot realm that was inhospitable to every other being that was not him, Shenron was locked within a deep slumber. The Earth core was its current home, as he seldom remembered his original living space, something that came before. For the likes of Shenron, there was no past, no future, only perpetuity. Suddenly, he then experiences a form of awakening. Of course, this isn't anything new. As usual, 7 tingling sensations were bringing him to Earth, but this time, the person at the other end was someone quite familiar. A wrinkly, old creature with a dark green hue of skin, resembling his master, but devoid of any kindness or goodness that he possessed. This was off. Something wasn't right. He began to state his wish. No, this was not right. The voice of the old man was still ringing in its enormous head.
"Now, dragon, appear before me!"
He began to talk.
I wish for...
Suddenly, a high-pitched scream could be heard. It was a childlike being, with skin as white as snow and rosy cheeks. "Make King Piccolo disappear from this!" An energy blast interrupted the wish, invalidating it. Shame, thought Shenron. So close. If he hadn't added the last part, he might have already done it. The mortals were distressed by what they were about to witness, especially the three-eyed one.
"I despise uninvited guests,"
said the old man. But Shenron had had his duty to perform. He couldn't be different or biased. He never stayed for long anyway.
"What do you wish for?"
he asked, as if he was slightly impatient, keen to get a move on.
"I wish to become young again, restore my youth and power, return to me what time was stolen. Can you do this?"
The harsh voice was loud and dominating, and also keen to get a move on, having been interrupted. To Shenron, this was a simple matter.
"As you wish."
Shenron watched as his own light enveloped the elder, who suddenly began to swell with increased musculature. His dried-out body, like a green prune, suddenly became a lot less wrinkly, and a little bit lighter in hue. He seemed very pleased with the results.
"It worked! I'm young again! I am born again!"
he said with a new strength in his voice that had previously been absent. His underlings were cheering amongst him, making sounds that were increasingly annoying for Shenron's ears, especially now the wish had been done. He wanted to return to his place of slumber and await the next time summoned him because it was getting quite regular.
"Your wish has been granted. I take my leave."
The one then called King Piccolo grinned wickedly.
There's one more thing you can do for me."
Some very quick thoughts went through the mind of the dragon. This was odd. He isn't able to fulfill more than one wish at a time. Surely this person would know this. Why was he being asked this? As the loud shout and a beam of energy from his toothy mouth connected with Shenron, he started to regret not retreating sooner. The pain was excruciating, something that he had never felt before. Who would ever attack a legendary dragon? It was as if every single atom of his being was on fire, slowly melting. Dragons should not be feeling pain, not like this. And yet, Shenron realized that, against all odds, death was slowly approaching, and getting faster. Something that was thought to be impossible for his kind. They were meant to be immortal. He was used to dwelling within the Earth's core, but the temperature here was even hotter, to the point where there was no mind in his head anymore. He couldn't think. Only perpetual, oppressive, excruciating light.
Shenron was no more.
It's such a funny thing that a mere stone statuette might hide such power within. The reality is that dragons do not simply go to the other world, as there can be no place for a creature of such magnitude between mortals. Instead, they come back to a state of eternal sleep in the place where they originated, hardly aware of what exactly was happening to them. Time is even less apparent than it was in the Earth's core. He could have been there for seconds, hours, days, years, maybe even a millennia or two. It would all feel the same to him, as his very essence had never ceased to be connected with the place, Earth, away from the mortal realm to boot. Still, a shell of stone had been left behind. Shattered was the ancient representation of an unknown mystical power. A careful movement of the hand and a little bit of adhesive here, produced by the mortals, could bring it back together. Oh, what wonders glue possess. It was pretty hilarious to see creatures of such esteem and age and legend being simply put back together again by a common object. But should modern ways of reparation not be used, or praised, or celebrated? That's why humans were so cool, he thought. Originally, he wasn't supposed to be back, as greedy and selfish mortals had been trying to use his powers for their own nefarious deeds. Instead of rewarding heroic acts, he had become the bearer of dangerous dreams of even more dangerous people who just so happened to find him constantly. He had been used to not be found for decades, sometimes centuries. Now it was almost every year. And yet after all was said and done, his master decided to bring him back after all. Weird, but okay. Something was waking him up from the endless slumber that he had accepted, from the realm that all the dragons came from. Their souls coiled and tangled like the threads of fate. He was being sent back and connected with his original Dragon Balls. Was it because of that boy, that Son Goku, that he had been seeing far more often in recent years? And kind of wished that he hadn't. He then felt a shift in Kami's heart, a new hope for restoration and a new beginning. Yes, it's all becoming clear to him now. Suddenly, he feels the draw, a shift. No rest for him, no respite. He was being summoned again. Someone was wishing on the Dragon Balls. He then sees a familiar young woman with blue hair once he arrives on Earth, or was it purple? Anyway, she was the nosy one who had managed to invent a dragon radar or something. Something that has made his life slightly more hectic in recent years. You know, glue is nice, but this dragon radar? Annoying. Well, we thought you destroyed Mr. Dragon, she said, startled by his presence a little bit.
Kami saw that Goku's purpose was noble, and so he chose to resurrect me.
The clarity of his own words was surprising even for Shenron himself. Well, where's Goku? The girl asked.
Kami has chosen Goku for an important task, and he is now training upon the lookout.
The dragon paused, seeing their surprised faces.
You will see him again at the next tournament.
Who is Goku training with? Asked the three-eyed man.
You shall know soon enough,
Shenron said, though he himself doesn't experience reality as they do.
Now, state your wish.
Okay. We wish you to bring back to life all of our friends who were killed by Piccolo and his monsters, screamed the girl.
Krillin, Master Roshi, and Ajutsu,
adds the small pig-like creature with a hoarse, unpleasant voice. Wait a minute, what about all the innocent people that Piccolo killed? You should help them too, said the tall, black-haired young man.
Well, that's a lot of people, Yamcha. Give the dragon some patience,
said the pig man. Shenron roared slightly after seemingly being lost in thought.
Very well. All the people that were slain by Piccolo shall be brought back to life.
The dragon's eyes glowed red. Lightning struck, and the 7 orbs traveled in 7 different directions. But before Shenron could rest inside the core once more, he heard the call of Kami summoning him.
My friend, a moment of your time, if you please. We need to discuss something. Something important.
In the depths of the dragon's personal mindscape, Shenron and Kami were conversing. This was not a case of mere chit-chat, like in the case of mortal beings. Instead, feelings and images were being exchanged. The sight of King Piccolo tearing the Grand Serpent apart, and the number of people asking for selfish, inane, stupid wishes. On the other hand, the simple purity of Son Goku and his friends, the beauty of the word, was something they both rarely experienced. Maybe they should use words more often. Godhood could be a cage. You watch, you are called, you are tied to your duty. That was getting a bit lame, he thought. The connection between the Guardian and his dragon was almost primordial, a primal sensation, the Namekian's existence on this mortal plane. And yet, an idea was being born. An idea that would allow at least one of them to see the world they serve a whole lot closer, to help defend the power of wishes from unworthy ones. There was hesitation. No eternal dragon before had ever stepped amongst mortals. His form was overwhelming after all, his size enormous. How would he remain inconspicuous? Ah, this is what Kami said. Nobody said that he couldn't walk a couple of miles in their shoes. It had just never been done. Shenron opened his eyes, if they were in fact eyes. They were small and glowless, still keeping a bit of crimson in the irises. His body was shorter, much shorter, and he felt heavier, even though the dragon was quite sure he had lost a considerable amount of weight in the process. His arms and legs became longer in proportion to his body, with his hands becoming almost pink and weirdly flesh-like, and his lower legs gaining feet. He touched his head. There was a storm of long, unkempt green hair. The horns were still there, but much smaller. Also, he had a beard. That was a weird thing. Beard. And he realized that he was completely naked, with Kami, Mr. Popo, and Goku staring back at him. The young monkey boy was absolutely shocked, but trying to hold back a laugh.
Wow, Shenron, is that you?
The dragon opened his mouth, and his voice came out very strange. There was no boom, it was almost simian-like.
I think so. What happened?
Kami smiled at him, and with a small gesture, some simple robes appeared to cover his new, scaleless flesh. You see, Kami also has a clothes beam.
So, we were successful. Yes, Goku. This is indeed Shenron, and he will be training with you.
Wow, so cool! I get to train with a dragon!
Shenron touched the temples of his head again. It's a very odd sensation, he thought. The world suddenly felt a whole lot bigger than it did this time yesterday. Or was it yesterday? Could have been 100 years ago, I don't know. Suddenly, time just felt like a river swirling around him. He was swimming through it now instead of looking down from it from above. Everything seemed more real.
Do I still have my powers?
He scratched his head. Kami looked at him with concern.
You must be very confused with the transition, my friend. Some of them come from your draconic nature, yes, but your wish-granting abilities, as well as your true form, they are still sealed within the Dragon Balls.
Shenron nodded slowly, beginning to understand.
Yes, I remember now. We agreed on that, so I can defend the Dragon Balls better and learn more about the world, so the likes of King Piccolo would never endanger you again. You can at least defend yourself.
Kami nodded.
That is so cool! I always wanted to check out how strong you really were, Shenron.
I am not sure. I still need to get used to this form.
Kami nodded slowly again.
Do not rush things, my friend. It will all come to you in time.
And so, Goku and the humanoid Shenron began their lives on the lookout. Now technically, the dragon should be all-knowing, wise, patient. But this version began to understand that this knowledge was nothing without practical attribution. He knew that mortals had to eat, but he had to learn that for himself. Hygiene and other bodily functions seemed alien to him. He'd never had to have a shower before. Luckily, he didn't have to learn how to walk, he already knew that. He exercised his body slowly, watching from afar how Kami and Mr. Popo were training Goku. Sure, he wasn't the all-knowing dragon anymore, but he wasn't dumb. One day, he decided to try it out for himself, against the new student of Kami, what he had seen. It was his first proper sparring session, although the difference between him and the boy was enormous. This was very humbling for the dragon. He just had to look down at people and people would flee in terror. The monkey boy was just so much more powerful. He was a skilled warrior. Shenron could manifest fire and some basic ki projectiles, but was in no way able to match the kid. This loss made him feel very bitter, but not towards Goku, no. Rather, more toward himself, his own ineptitude. Luckily, this feeling quickly metamorphosed into a new focus, becoming a better guardian for the Dragon Balls, and learning with Goku seemed like the best way to achieve it. He was pretty good. What also became a little overwhelming was the passage of time and his body having to rest and requiring food. He had to keep reminding himself about it. 8 hours of sleep, 3 meals. So much time in mortal life has been taken to simply fuel the form. True, he had the advantage of not aging. He was still immortal, but this was scary. Being taken away from a cozy eternity and then placed in a time that ran like crazy. It was quite overwhelming. Everything was moving much faster. And on top of that, in different directions. Nevertheless though, Goku in that time became a good friend. Maybe not someone to have deep conversations with, he wasn't that sort of person. He had Lord Kami for that, but he was still a supportive being. And over the months, he began to be more surprised when the boy started to grow. It wasn't like regular humans, something was different about it. They didn't usually just shoot up like a stick of bamboo. He could understand, but he liked this new aspect of life, how things grew and aged, discovering stuff. It was as if all the knowledge was within his reach, but the books containing it were closed off to his mind. He only had to ask though. He could learn, but for now, he decided against it. He knew that to live closer to mortals, he had to think like one. Not many people liked a smart-ass, even if it meant a lot of uncertainty and a bit of fear along the way, and he slowly comprehended what his new purpose would be. To be there with Goku for the tournament, when he should face Piccolo's reincarnation. In the worst case scenario, he would be the one to fight the evildoer. And honestly, they still had some stuff to work through. A certain grudge, you could say. It was absolutely terrifying, but for some reason, the anticipation felt good. For the first time in his eternal existence, Shenron was excited about what the future would bring. The clock started turning for him. We hope you enjoyed part 1, or our prologue to our new Christmas miracle What If, where we tackle the idea of Shenron becoming a humanoid mortal. We got this idea from many people, including the likes of Sigma Fifth Guy, Tigerfire, and of course numerous other people in the chat. We hope you enjoyed this one. See you Monday.